urban landscape manager for a long time. She's currently doing that as an employee of Tucson Water. So if you want to talk about urban landscape, Tucson Water points you directly to Irene. She's been a member of the Shade Tucson Coalition, which a few years ago took up the banner of 15% shade canopy for the city of Tucson. And we were very gratified when a year and a half ago, approximately, when Renes Romero was running for mayor, that she was saying 1 million trees would be a great goal. So we're really happy that the city is on that bandwagon too. And speaking of trees, another member of that coalition who was a conservation advocate for Tucson Audubon is Nicole Gillet. And she had the great fortune of, or perhaps the great weight of being hired as the urban forest manager. There are as many ordinances and relationships and offices to go through as there are leaves to count on a tree. But she's hanging in there and gathering her knowledge, making relationships, building alliances, and we'll hear from her about that. And Natalie Shepp is our fourth, and Natalie has been quite a while involved in sustainability issues. She's now Senior Program Manager for Outreach and Education at the county's Department of Environmental Quality. She's really proud to be able to combine her experience in air quality planning, modeling, and compliance with the years she spent at the UA's Cooperative Extension. She says that her goal is to create community-led initiatives focused on reducing motor vehicle emissions. So very concerned about climate change, environmental justice, and community health. Wonderfully, she was selected as one of the 21-22 Emerging Sustainability Leaders by Arizona Forward. So thank you, Natalie and Samantha and Nicole and Irene, for being here tonight. Our format is we sent them some questions ahead of time. I will serve to ask each of them the question. They will each have 3 minutes maximum to answer that one question. And there's about 5 such questions. And when we're done with that, then they each get to ask another one of them a question. And after that, we'll open up to the floor. We're asking that if you have a question, please consider writing it down ahead of time. There's a wonderful phrase they use at the Center for Community Dialogue, a lean of speech. Often less said can be more heard and more comprehended. And Trace is our friendly sergeant at arms, and he'll mute you if you go over too long with a wonderful statement. I'm sure we've all got some great statements to make, but tonight we're here to ask and listen and learn. So, as you saw or heard, we are being recorded. We encourage you, to the extent you can, to show your face only because it makes us feel more present together. Now, I myself have taken more than one webinar with the screen off. I mean, my picture is showing, but I'm eating lunch or doing my exercises. And because life has lots of requirements, I want to get that webinar in. I also want to get that lunch. So if you're having dinner, enjoy. But when it's appropriate, please do, if you can, if you got the bandwidth to let us see your face. All right, so the first question, and why don't we just go alphabetically? So that would be, let's see, Irene, Natalie, Nicole, and then Samantha. So that's the order we'll take in answering the questions. So here's question number 1. Irene, what is your department's mission relative to sustainability, and what is your role in that regard? And I'll start the clock.
Okay, I don't think I'm going to need 3 minutes, but I know 3 minutes goes pretty fast. And I see Kevin Dahl's on this meeting, so I just want to congratulate him to becoming part of the One Team, One City. Thank you. So Tucson Water's mission is pretty clear-cut. You can go on to their website, and it's their commitment to ensure that customers receive high-quality water and excellent service in a safe, reliable, efficient, and environmentally responsible manner. But I want to go a little bit beyond that because we're now working on our One Water 2100 plan. And part of that has a vision in which Tucson is committed to resilience, equity, stewardship, and quality of life. And part of that goal wraps into to ensure that sustainability and high quality water supply into the future. So my role in all of that is that commitment, for sustainability, reliability, environmentally responsible manner. That's it. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, but Irene, what is your role in regard to that mission?
Well, I'm in the Public Information and Conservation Office, so it's carrying out that message to the public.
Great, thank you. And a great model, 1 minute and 25 seconds. We'll get a lot in tonight. Okay, so let's see, Natalie, what is your department's mission and what is your role?
Okay, so I'm just going to read you the actual mission statement we have listed on our website so I get it right. And that is to preserve and protect the environment of Pima County for the long-term benefit of residents' health, welfare, safety, and quality of life, and identify and respond to environmental issues by providing public services, including monitoring, enforcement, information, education, and solid waste management. And so my role is really involved in the education and information side of things. So as the program manager for outreach and education, it's my job to ensure that the services that we provide, that the residents of Pima County know what those services are and know how to take advantage of those services. And ultimately, a big part of my role is to administer the Clean Air program, which is focused really specifically on trying to encourage people to drive less and help them understand why it's important to drive less, why their personal impact to air pollution and to greenhouse gas emissions. Each one of us can play a role in reducing that contribution, and ways that we can do that. So we try to find ways to help people get information that they can bike or ride the bus easier, ways that they can carpool, or even trying to encourage people to telecommute. Those types of things are really important. But it is a big part of my job because we do get a grant to administer that program from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. But really, I see my role as broader than just the Clean Air program, and it's important that when we have issues with permit, like for example, we are issuing a rather contentious permit right now, so it's important for me to air quality permit to ensure that the public understands the ramifications of that and understands the opportunities that they have to provide input on the issuance of that permit. I also, play a role with businesses and can help them try to abide by their permit conditions if they have an air quality permit with us, and help them figure out ways to meet those goals within their permits easier. And then ensure that we're doing our due diligence with respect to environmental justice and equity, and that people who traditionally are more disadvantaged or more impacted by environmental stressors, that we actually work toward trying to reduce those impacts in the long term. So it's kind of a broad job that I have, but I'm quite enjoying it in this short. I've been in this job for only 6 months, so I don't act like I'm an expert on everything, but I'm enjoying it very much.
Thank you. We appreciate that very much, Natalie. So let's see, Nicole, what is of course, you'll have to explain it. You're not really in a department. So what is your office's mission relative to sustainability, and what is your role?
Yeah, thanks for having me tonight. Glad to see so many familiar and new faces. My name is Nicole, and I'm the City of Tucson's Urban Forestry Program Manager. And as Stuart kind of alluded to, I actually sit in the city manager's office. And that allows me to be very flexible and work with all the departments in our city that touch trees in some way, which, as I'm learning over this past, I've been in this position, is pretty much every department. And I owe huge thanks to Irene and others for just catching me up and teaching me how a city works and how within that an urban forest also works. So it's been a very informative year. So kind of where I sit is an interesting and unique position. My actual job title was created once the mayor took office and launched Tucson Million Trees initiative. And so my position was created with, I think, some good forethought that, of course, Tucson Million Trees, the goal there is to plant 1 million trees. We also need to grow, sustain, and maintain those trees. So thinking beyond, this initial planting, very ambitious planting goal, but into our future, and actually working to grow a resilient, long-term, meeting the challenges of climate change, addressing historic inequities, but an urban forest that serves us all. So I get to work with every city department, but also all of our partners in the community and the county and other jurisdictions. So I've had just a really fascinating year, and even despite COVID, meeting so many amazing people doing amazing work here in our region. So I'm also here to learn tonight and look forward to hearing from all of you. So thanks.
Super, thank you, Nicole. Now, Samantha, what we know your department, but tell us a little bit about its mission, and then what's your role for forwarding the mission of District 5?
Hi, so District 5 is one of the county districts, and I work for Supervisor Grijalva, who's the supervisor for District 5. Traditionally, the D5 office has had great leaders in sustainability. Leaders like David Yetman, Congressman Raul Grijalva, Richard Elias, and Betty Villegas. And we wanted to honor that legacy of advocacy. We worked on a strategic plan for several months. We created it with a committee of roughly 50 community leaders and experts from various organizations and backgrounds. They became our advisory board, and together we came up with policy goals under 4 overarching priorities: climate resilience, education, housing, and health. Our mission is to reach a shared vision of a healthy, thriving community by honoring and preserving our history and environment and maintaining a vision of hope for future generations. We will collaborate with neighborhoods and essential partners to create systemic change and advance shared policy goals. My role is as a community liaison, as well as researching ways that the county can accomplish the goals we established. I facilitated the group that worked on the climate resilience priority, and I'm excited to share our goals with you today. 3 of our goals are to expand access to clean air and water, defend, restore, expand, and connect public lands, and enhance the urban environment at the neighborhood level. And if you would like to learn more about our strategic plan, you can visit www.pima.gov/district5, and I can put that in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you, all 4 of you, and Samantha. We're really excited about this strategic plan you're discussing. All right, so our second question. Everyone has been right on the clock, so we will continue now with the second question, and this is more personal. What is a memorable moment that led you to environmental social awareness? And this moment could be 2 years ago, it could be when you were 4 years old. And I think, Irene, we start with you again.
All right, yep, it's longer than 2 years ago that I'll reference. So my former life, I was a registered nurse. So as a registered nurse, I think environmental and social awareness is always there. But part of why I moved into landscape architecture is that I realized And I followed a lot of research that had to do with healing and patients healing and their rates at which they were healing. And if they had access to the outdoor, even if that was visual access, they tended to heal faster. So I worked on a surgical ward, and it was orthopedics, and I was actually in the Navy. So I would wheel those Marines outdoors they would be pinned to their beds because they'd have some pin in their leg or something. But I would make sure that if it was a nice day outside, that their beds got outside to the patio for at least 10 minutes if it was good weather. So I would say way back then, just my interest as a nurse and ways people heal, and realizing that, it's all in the environment. If we're in a good environment, we're going to be much healthier. So I would say that was probably it.
It's a beautiful story, Irene. Thank you
Thank
so much. So let's ask Natalie. Let's see. Yeah, Natalie, you are next. What's your memory?
I'm glad you gave me this question in advance, these questions in advance, because I was able to kind of ponder it for a bit. My first memory of kind of becoming an environmentalist, I would say, was about 30 years ago. And that was when I was a freshman in high school. And I was going to high school up in Phoenix. And there was an after-school club that was led by my Spanish teacher. And it had an acronym that was SHADOW. And that stood for Students Helping Against the Destruction of Our World. And I always remember that acronym because I think it's a really great one. And the fact that it's an actual word is pretty cool. And so I joined that club, and I can't remember what motivated me. It's been so long now to actually join that club, but there must have been something deep inside me that wanted me to go on that path. So that's where I started to learn about environmental issues and sustainability issues, and learned all about the different facets of that, the many different facets of that. And then when I was pondering what I wanted to study in college, my senior year of high school, I decided that I really wanted to get into that field as a career. And so I came to the U of A because at the time, the U of A was the only school in Arizona that had an environmental science program. So went to the U of A and went through that program, and then ended up interning at PDEQ, where I'm employed now. So this is my second go around there. And then many years later, actually in 2017, I was working at the U of A, and I decided to get my master's in public health, because one of the things that I really wanted with my environmental science degree, it was a great degree, it gave me a really great background, but it didn't really make very close associations with the impact that environmental degradation has on humans. And so I really wanted to kind of bridge that gap by learning more about public health and and how the environmental impacts affect human health. So getting both of those degrees really kind of helped me solidify what I want to do, and help me in the job that I have today. And so that's my story about being an environmentalist.
What fun. Yeah, I see some appreciation. I'm noticing lots of smiles on the faces that are listening and speaking, and it reminds me of what a contra dance caller once said. As she was teaching a dance, she said, "Don't worry if you haven't got it right. If you're smiling, you must be doing the right thing." So you must be doing the right thing, Natalie. So Nicole.
Yes, I'm also glad you handed these questions out in advance, because it got me to kind of do some reminiscing. And so, yeah, I went way back, more than 2 years ago. And I think even before I was thinking about what a career was, or what the future was, I was a kid growing up in the Northwest, and while I was in elementary school, we had a large earthquake hit the Northwest, and it's a memory of a don't they'll ever forget, feeling the earth move under your feet and kind of the world become topsy-turvy, and then suddenly you're you're outside looking for your younger sister and pretty sure that the entire world is ending and that this is the last, like the last moment that you're going to be able to hold your sister and everything. Of course, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was not even that big of an earthquake. But we all got to practice our training. And I remember that the next couple of weeks after that was a lot of volunteering because the earthquake hit our community very differently. And so, some people had a clock fall off their wall and some people had trees fall through their house. So it was kind of one of my youngest memories of being kind of tossed in and feeling very small in the world and, realizing how tied people are to the planet and kind of sometimes aren't in control. And so that's one of my earliest memories of realizing that I, was both awed and amazed by the natural world and was kind of I just wanted to learn more and to learn more about what our place in this world was and what natural processes looked like. And it kind of spurred me to get out and join some clubs and just be outside as much as I could and never stop being in awe of kind of the world around us.
So a slightly traumatic event became an opening into a deeper sense of the world around you and a part you might play in that world. Well, let's see. Samantha, what's your memory?
Well, I grew up at a time when it was very hard to avoid the reality of climate change. So I think the awareness was always there. But one moment that particularly made climate change and the environment an urgent issue to me was seeing the Bighorn fire in the sky covered in smoke and because it's only a taste of what is to come with climate change. And appreciating the beauty of our surroundings and a desire to protect that and our community.
So a very simple, clear message there from that fire. How many people are resonating with some of these stories from your own background? Just curious. Of course, we got a lot of names on the screen. Put a thumb up or something if you're resonating with these stories. There we go, Kanye. Well, let's continue because now we're going to go a little more into your vision of what's needed right now. Well, actually, let's wait. Let's look at an accomplishment. Now, Natalie, you mentioned you've just been 6 months with PDEQ, so you might not have much to say about that, but you might refer to something earlier, and same Samantha if you're just recently with Adelita. But think of an accomplishment that you feel good about in your work, hopefully related to sustainability, but if you don't have one of those yet, anything you felt good about in your work. And if you'd like to say any benefits that you saw from that work as well. And we'll start in the same order. Irene?
Sure. So for me, I would say a little over 20 years ago, I had the good fortune to work with Betsy Bolding, who was the outreach person for TEP back then. And then with Joan Lionetti, who was the Tucson Clean and Beautiful's executive director. And then there was also a woman named Kate Bradley, who was an independent consultant. So what we had done back like in 1998 was we started a series of urban heat island conferences. So we had 3 conferences and they were sort of tri-state. We invited people from California and Utah and Texas, as well as the EPA and the DOE and someone from Berkeley Lab. So it was interesting for me to start learning a lot about UHI back then. And I had the good fortune that when I came to the city, I didn't want to do any more conferences because that's a lot of work. But I thought if Back then, the city had over, I want to say 6,000 employees. And if I could get to every one of those 6,000 employees to understand what a UHI was, that would be a great accomplishment. So I started doing the city's UHI workshops. So just last week, we had our 12th workshop. I tried to do it annually, and I worked with the Landscape Advisory Committee, and we set agendas. Or at least themes for each workshop. So this year's workshop was UHI and equity. And I thought that was a very good workshop. And in terms of feeling good and what benefits have come out of this, I remember the very first workshop we had with the city about 15 years ago. There were some department directors who didn't even know what an urban heat island was, which really sort of surprised me. But I guess 15 years ago, it wasn't a common term back then. But if you talk to any director or almost any city employee today, they all pretty much know what a UHI is. And I would say all the reports that come out of the departments have something to do with addressing and mitigating the urban heat island. So I feel really good that city staff is understanding that a lot more and addressing that issue.
You look pleased, and I think we all can understand why. Proud of that work.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Irene. And Natalie, how about you?
I'll just say I attended that workshop last week and it was fabulous. Nice work, Irene. I learned a lot. I think my success that I'm really proud of is kind of unrelated to any work I've done that I've been paid for. So I've done a number of things on a voluntary basis. And one of the things that I've done is I started a community garden in my neighborhood about 12 years ago. I was a stay-at-home mom at that time, and I really wanted to get into gardening. Didn't have a background with my family watching them garden, but hadn't done much myself, and realized that I would not successfully be able to garden in my backyard because of all the shade, and just was not conducive to good growing conditions. So I worked with the community gardens of Tucson to start a community garden in my neighborhood. So it's the Highland Vista Community Garden. And I was the site coordinator for that garden for about 10, 11 years. And then when I gave up my role as site coordinator, then I joined the board of directors in January. And now I'm working with Community Gardens of Tucson on the board. And I'm proud because the garden is still going and thriving, and we have a very tight-knit neighborhood where everybody kind of knows each other, with a park in the middle and a community pool, and the garden just is right in that same space. So it provides another community space to bring people together. And I get a lot of mental health benefits from gardening, and didn't really anticipate that would be an outcome for me when I started gardening, but it's been the best thing besides having fresh vegetables. And I really love teaching others how to garden, and working with kids as well, and families, and trying to get young people to really appreciate how beneficial local food production can be and working in a garden can be. So I would say that's one of the most that I'm very proud of that accomplishment.
There is something so fulfilling about that work, Natalie. And Irene has pointed out that Bruce Plank is here this evening, and he is a board member of the Community Gardens of Tucson.
Hi, Bruce.
And I will put in a little plug for our Sustainable Tucson Ambassadors program. We've had Jessica Paul, who's the garden educator for Community Gardens of Tucson. She's presented both times. And in fact, this time around, she's also in the training group for Sustainable Tucson's ambassadors. So we are really excited to hear from you also, Nicole. What's something you're proud about?
So I have more of an advocacy background than government background. So one thing you learn in advocacy is learning to celebrate both small and partial wins, because you need to take advantage of those moments just to prop yourself up. So I was thinking kind of through that lens over the years, and just most recently in the city, I've learned a lot about how all these processes work in the city, and how to get things done. And I think something we're really close to getting completed is actually a tree inventory for the city of Tucson, and we have funding in the bank for that. And getting folks to start talking about trees as assets is something that I am really just happy to see actually working when I'm out in the field with folks, and having just everyday employees talking about trees as actual city assets. And if you're not familiar with kind of how the city values things, right, it needs to be on the books as an asset, so we can track work against it, keep track of dollar amounts, and that's how we have accountability for our city infrastructure. So to me, it's a partial win, and we're getting there, and it makes me very happy.
Thanks for that reminder, Nicole, because it can be frustrating if you haven't reached the top of the mountain yet, but there's a good view even up in the foothills. Okay, so now let's see, Samantha.
So one accomplishment I'm very proud of for our office is the strategic plan that I mentioned. It is the first time, to our knowledge, that a Pima County supervisor or any elected official has created a strategic plan. I think that we did a very good job of taking our advisory board's suggestions and incorporating them into our strategic plan, and watching the plan evolve with those suggestions. And another reason I am proud of it is because it allows people to be involved in the work of our office, and it creates a network for action, since we can't accomplish our goals without the community support. It also keeps us accountable and transparent.
I think we can learn lessons from all of you about leanness of speech this evening. It makes me want to hear more. So we'll continue the conversation. And by the way, Samantha, congratulations. That's quite a thing to have done as a new aide in the government to facilitate a process like that.
It was a team effort, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, spoken like a true leader. What issues or needs feel most pressing to you now? And you might want to take a little longer on this one. Irene?
Sure. I don't know if I'll take a little longer, but since I'm with Tucson Water, I think for us, one of the pressing issues, of course, is our water consumption and the looming drought that's hovering over us here in the Southwest. And so working with folks in the Tucson Water arena about our water resources. And I'm glad that the hydrologists are doing all of those dumps of the reclaimed water into several sites so that we can recharge our aquifer. So those would be like the Sweetwater wetlands, which was initiated back in 1998. And then last year we had the Heritage Project that's now releasing water in the Santa Cruz. And then over on the southeast side, we have what we call the Sharp Project, but soon to be renamed for Shirley Scott, since it's over in her district, or her former district, since she's not the council person there anymore. And then more recently, I'm going to say, I think it was last week, we're now releasing some water upstream from the Heritage Project, also in the Santa Cruz. So that has to do with trying to replenish our aquifer in the low, what do they call it? The low the high aquifer areas, which are closer to our drainage ways. And so part of all of that, even being worried about our water consumption and making sure that we have this quality water for the next 100 years, it's all about having to address climate change as well, right? We're getting hotter, our weather patterns are getting more intense and less frequent. And then as Nicole knows, it's partly putting the canopy out there. But I know in some arenas, they say that putting the trees is counteracting the recharge side. So, but most of the basins that we have are not for recharge because we know that our aquifer is so deep. But we do need that greenery for all other stuff. And while working with the university and other researchers, even at the national level with EPA and DOE and the climate change folks is really important. And it's kind of overwhelming to think about those big picture things. So just working on UHI for me is a comfort to bring it down to a level that I can sort of manage.
Well, it sounds, Irene, as though UHI is an organizing issue for helping you think about water and trees and all the other issues that we're facing, because
Sure.
We need to get things cooler here.
Yes.
Okay, super. And by the way, I'm not sure we're all watching the chat. Bruce Plank just pointed out that Shirley Scott was the first, well, her ward office was the first solar panels on a city building, and that was in 1999. So he's very happy to hear about her being honored with the naming of that recharge project. Okay, so let's see. Natalie, what issues and needs are you seeing especially?
The issue I think that's the most pressing, and this is an issue that I've been passionate about probably since the time I was, well, maybe not in high school, but certainly in college when I was studying environmental science, is climate change. I do think that that is the most pressing issue of all issues, whether they are environmental issues or any other issues you want to talk. I think climate change trumps all of them. And that's because it's an existential threat and it affects every single person that lives on planet Earth. And so one of the things that I was committed to doing when I started this job at PDEQ was trying to shed more light on that. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic that we have at the county Department of Environmental Quality, because we've been doing this clean air program for about 30 years because we had at one time a pretty serious carbon monoxide problem. And that's what kind of got the whole program started in the first place. And so we've been promoting driving less and ways to do that for a long, long time as it relates to air pollution. So things like ozone or carbon monoxide or particulate matter, those are criteria air pollutants. But what we haven't done so much is how that relates to greenhouse gases and those emissions. And it turns out that the same things that we're promoting to reduce air pollution are the same things we would promote to reduce greenhouse gases. But we don't receive money to promote that. We don't get money from the state to try to do anything about climate change. So there's no funding whatsoever that comes into our department that asks us to specifically address climate change. So I'm taking it upon myself to do that. And the reason I'm doing it is because I think it must be done. And I also think it's not that tough of it's the same promotion. We're not having different messaging here. It's the same messaging of driving less and using less electricity and things like that. But climate change affects everything we do. I mean, it is related to solid waste. It is related to water. It is related to agriculture. It's related to all those things. So I think that a lot of people maybe don't understand the complexities of many of those facets of how every time we buy something, putting out greenhouse gases that had to be put into the air to make that product, and how the things we choose to eat actually will affect how much carbon is in the atmosphere. People don't understand those connections. And so I think it's important for us as a department to really be promoting educating people about those connections and how their actions can play a role, even if they seem very small. But that is really important to me. And I will say right here and now that I'm very interested in working with whomever wants to work with Pima County DEQ on this issue. I am open to working with you on it, despite the fact that I don't have any funding to do it. That doesn't make a difference to me. I think it's really, really important. And I think that I'm in a position with the department to actually, make a difference. And I think it will take all of us collectively to do that. I want to do it at the county level with respect to our sustainable action plan. I'm already working on various facets of that as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions. Like at this point in time, we don't really look at commuter travel as part of our sustainable action plan. I think that's a problem. And so I'm trying to shed some light on that and see if we can really do it within the county operations, but also within the county collectively by working with other departments to promote education around it and ways that we can work collectively to try to reduce our overall carbon emissions in this region.
Wow. So we've got our work cut out for us. And it's interesting how what you're saying reflects a similar effort on the part of District 5. It sounds like you're talking about strategic planning for this purpose. So there's lots of room for collaboration here. Keep moving. Nicole, what issues are you seeing as most pressing within your frame of reference?
Yeah, for me, it's, I think we need to get very real about bringing our community together. And I don't know if anyone else has heard this, but it's kind of, rather than bringing people to the table, we need to start like knocking down doors to the dining room. We need to start moving that table. We need to get up out of the table and start mingling around the room. Like, we don't have time to, spend twiddling our thumbs, basically. And so my kind of mission with my vehicle, which is Tucson Million Trees, is just to get out there and start doing things, right? And rather than putting prescriptions on what being an environmentalist looks like, what you need to do to participate, what kind of language you need to speak or who you need to know, is kind of take this idea and how can we make it work for your community, for your family, and where you are right now. And so we have so much data, we have so many maps, we have so many plans, right? We know where in our city it's the hottest. We know those who are most vulnerable to heat and the future impacts of climate change. We know all these things. And it's kind of just time to start getting it done, right? We need to get out to communities, ask them, how can we help? And then actually put actions to our plans and our words. And so I've been blessed during this time of COVID where I can get out and just start meeting people out in communities, out in neighborhoods, in parks, and making stuff happen, right? You don't need a lot of money to do this. And when you do, we can make it go a long way. So that's not something super specific, and it's kind of all encompassing with climate change, but people are ready. They're excited. They're also scared and ready to get stuff done. So I would love to just galvanize everyone here to start getting out, join tree plantings on the weekend, help with our cleanup efforts, leave your current neighborhood, go meet some new people, and we need to start bringing our community together.
All right, a rallying cry for the troops. And we appreciate that, Nicole. By the way, if you have not seen the chat, Robert Bulichek, who is an energy advisor, an energy consultant, putting all kinds of resources in his chat box there, which you might enjoy. Trace, do you want to see if there's anyone who needs to be muted? Thanks. And everybody, I hope you've written down at least one question to ask, because our speakers are quite succinct, and so we'll have plenty of time to ask them a few questions. And Kevin, I certainly hope you'll have at least one question to add to the mix. Okay, and that takes us, I believe, to Samantha. What is most pressing in your mind?
I guess I agree with the issues that everyone brought up. I also, in particular, water scarcity, and in general, global warming, because that is the issue that will impact all of us. Right now, our office is working on our goals for climate resilience, which is making sure everyone has clean air and clean water. Members of our staff attend open houses and public meetings about, for instance, air quality permits for ethylene oxide or on PFAS in the water, and becoming educated on these issues. In terms of defend, restore, expand public lands, we are working on policy to protect the Sonoran Desert from being decimated by developers. And we already supported a resolution in opposition to Interstate 11, which would go through the Sonoran Desert. In terms of enhancing the urban environment at the neighborhood level, we are putting together a list of environmental partners that could serve as in an advisory capacity, as well as service learning sites for community volunteers. And we continue to advocate for the improvement of public transit, including cross-city mobility, safe transit stops, and clean transportation alternatives.
Wow, that'll be enough to keep us busy at least till next year, and busy in a good way. So we're going to ask the $64 question, which is, you've been saying so, each of you, in indirectly, sometimes perhaps directly, but let's just be straightforward. You've got about 16, 18 listeners, audience members here who care. They would like to scale up what they're doing. We all want to up our game. And of course, each of us is connected with folks who aren't here today, but there's a neighborhood association board member here. There's a board director for a nonprofit. There's We Sustainable Tucson is a nonprofit. We know people who would like to get engaged. So our question this evening is, how can we help you with one or more of your projects? And that's a question to each of our speakers this evening. And we'll start with Irene.
Yeah, that sort of is a $64 million question, although $64 million doesn't go very far today like it used to, does. I think it's exactly what you were saying, Stuart, and indirectly we've all been saying it, is just stay in contact with each other, with who you have a contact with, and do that volunteer, or just like what Robert was doing in the chat, just keep bugging, the government officials to try and change. Don't be afraid to be in elected officials' faces. So, Kevin's on right now, and he'll be one of those elected officials starting January. Get in his face if you're in his ward, or even if you're not in his ward. And then I saw, I don't see him anymore. Richard Roati was on, and only because.
Richard is here.
Oh, okay, because he's in the same neighborhood I am, and he's a great guy. He's been planting trees and keeping things clean in this neighborhood, that asking more people to do exactly that. And Tucson Clean and Beautiful has the team up to clean up. And that's just to try and keep our community more beautiful and less junky looking. And there's a city team called the Litter Fee Committee, and we try to pick projects at strategic corners to beautify a little bit. So you may have noticed on your way to the airport, there's a couple of corners right there at Kino and is it Old Nogales, not Old Nogales Highway, but Pino and Ajo. There's a couple of projects that we worked on that have been improved. So internally, the city is trying to do those sort of things. But if you have anything to say, do say it and do get in front of council. I was listening to Mayor and Council's study session today, and there's a lot going on in all of the wards, and just be involved. That's the most important thing. And even if you disagree with all of us, keep pushing for what you think is important.
So you're saying be present and you'll find a place where you can contribute.
Yes, and I know all of you in one way or another have been on committees and you've been letting your voices be heard. I know Robert's been on a lot of climate action kind of committees for a long time and always pushing for those electric vehicles, electric everything.
And we thank you for that, Robert. And thank you, Irene, for the reminder.
Yep. And I see Kevin corrected me. He takes office next month.
Okay. All right. Well, Natalie, how can we help?
I definitely agree with Irene that staying involved and really trying to help the elected officials understand that about what you think is important is really makes a big difference. So definitely take Irene's advice on that one and stay in their face and let them know what you're passionate about. I would say, just as far as the two organizations that I'm still involved with, Pima County DEQ and the Community Gardens of Tucson, one thing that would be helpful is just having your fellow sustainably minded citizens, and even those who are not, know what we offer, and stay involved in the programs that we provide. If you follow us on Facebook, PDQ has a Twitter handle as well, that we will always be posting about the different activities that we have. And if you participate in any of those activities, then you're doing something, you're doing your part. So like recently we had Car Free Day celebrations and Walk and Roll School. And so those are the types of things that if you just hear about them and know about them and help us spread the word, that's really helpful. And then if you participate in them, that's even better. And the reason that we are offering those types of events and those activities is because they help people make realizations about little actions that they can take each day to try to do something to improve the environment. So that's helpful. And with the Community Gardens of Tucson, I think a lot of people within Tucson still don't know about our organization. And so if you're interested in getting involved in gardening, even if you're a novice, it's a great place to start because the space and the water is provided, the tools are provided, education is provided. And we're always looking for people to become involved at deeper levels if you have the time as well, through either by a site coordinator or even serving on the board. So it's a really great organization. It's different than just gardening in your backyard, which is also fabulous to do. But really the mission there is for us is to try to get people to do it within a community space. So kind of like what Nicole was saying, finding ways to bring people together. And we do that through gardening. We happen to get vegetables out of it while we're at it. And it's a really great organization that was started a long time ago by George Brookbank. He was an extension agent for many years, and he had a passion for gardening, and he started the organization to try to get the community involved in gardening together. And it's a really great concept. So I would invite you all to explore what we have to offer both at PDEQ and CGT, and tell your friends and get involved in any way that you can.
Thank you for those two great venues to participate. And there's something I'm going to say, let's see, Bruce said something. Bruce, I hope you'll ask your question and just give me a message if you can't get on audio, and I'll ask it for you. But let's finish up with Nicole and then Samantha.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both what Irene and Natalie said, and I kind of already gave my my big pride is just to get out and start doing stuff. So for the unsexy side of how these things get done, and I know all of you are already probably more involved and connected than the average citizen joining this call. You're already doing something, so I applaud you for that. And a couple of kind of, behind the scenes technical things that we could really use your support on is that, one, if you don't already have a direct connection to your ward office and your supervisor's office, just make one. Reach out. Staff there are waiting to hear from you. So just developing that relationship so that they know, that you're going to call, that you are someone that they can turn to for help as well. And because those are some of the best connections right to decision making, right? And then on my end, on staff end, when it comes time for things like the budget rolling around, right? Having people be able to pay attention to that, get in contact with their ward offices and voice support or opposition to what is there. I'm gonna make an ask here to keep watching the budget for the next several years and keep helping support what we are doing, because things are exciting right on the front end, right? And we get budgets for things like climate action plans, which we should be very proud of. It's happening. But then the follow-up on that, right? We need staffing, we need budget to actually make that stuff happen. And then even on the even less sexy side, we need money for code enforcement. This is something that I keep coming back to that I knew nothing about before I hopped on board with the city. But once we put in great rules, once we get great programs in place, follow through maintenance, that also requires funding, right? So keep paying attention to things even once they're out of the limelight. And if you notice something that is doing good and like it's actually working, reaching out to your ward office and also mentioning that is just as it brightens everyone's day, because really, this is also something I learned when I came on with the city. We really only hear from folks when stuff is going wrong, right? And if you aren't noticing something and it's going right, that's just how a city runs, right? So we kind of take that for granted. But if something is working particularly clean, or you notice a new tree planted and you mention that to Kevin, I might hear about it and it'll make my day sparkle, right? So staying in contact with your decision makers, keeping an eye on some of these things that are happening kind of behind the scenes. I know the next council meeting, Move Tucson Complete Streets, is coming up, and that would be great to have folks on board just giving support to greening up our streets, having proper provisions in there for future landscaping. So these kinds of things are frequently on the books. And if you're signed up for your ward office and your supervisor's office's newsletters, as well as the mayor's newsletter, you can get a heads up on those things happening. But also by developing those relationships, as I mentioned, your staff can actually reach out to you and ask for your comments and support. So we are here waiting for you. We are public servants, and so very much rely on folks actually being involved. So that's kind of the behind the scenes. If you're not out on a Saturday planting a tree, maybe write a letter to your ward office.
Thank you, Nicole. At first, I was being worried that we are just getting general encouragement to get out and do things. I'm looking at folks who are here on climate change committee for the community college, or start up with the Repair Cafe, and then someone's been a board member for many years of the neighborhood association, and someone who's the chair of our faith-based and sustainability committee. So these are people who are engaged, but these are good reminders. So let's hear Samantha.
I agree with what everyone said, and one thing I want to reemphasize is connecting with your supervisor and your city council person. How you please connect with our office. You can sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media. Adelita films recaps of every Board of Supervisor meeting, highlighting the important votes that happened, issues that were discussed. And we plan to do quarterly updates on our strategic plan. So please just uh, sign up for those things so you know what our office is doing. We will also have volunteer opportunities with our office for community cleanups and other events. We also provide information about different volunteer opportunities with different organizations. And most importantly, let us know if there are events that our office can be a part of, or what ideas you have for furthering the goal of creating a sustainable future for Pima County. We really want to hear from you. And also, it's very important to vote. Continue to vote for politicians like Supervisor Grijalva who prioritize the environment. Be involved with local politics. You know, if you're able to, watch Board of Supervisor meetings or stay up to date with what happens. Watch the City of Tucson meetings, participate in call to the public, send in comments. If you and because if make sure to talk to people about what's on your mind, and be involved with these meetings, because the only solution that works is one that we come up with together. So we're looking forward to hearing from you and to help in any way we can.
Words to live by. The only solution that works is the one that we come up with together. So I open the floor. Reminder, please. This is a time for our guests to be the major speakers, but you can trigger their thoughts with a thoughtful question rather than a statement. And would you like to see the conversation? You had written that question in the chat.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stuart. I wanted to ask our panelists about what they think the best thing the city and the county could do to get more solar installed on houses and businesses around town, particularly in low-income areas, because as we all know, every time people get their electricity from solar, they're saving water. So that goes right to the question that Irene and some other people mentioned. And we also know that using solar for electricity generation instead of burning gas helps air. And that goes to some of the things that Natalie mentioned. But I guess the question is, what can the city and county governments do to facilitate more solar happening? We know we have the sun, but we just need to figure out how to get more solar. I'd be interested in people's ideas about that.
Hey, open to any panelist who'd like to take that on. Irene, you're smiling.
Well, I sort of had responded to Bruce, you know, I think it's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have the answer. I don't know what sort of incentives we can provide. So I know Kevin's not a screenshot, but I'm looking at his picture. And as a oncoming council member, if he has any thoughts in that area. I know, Bruce, you were once with the city in the energy office or the general services, and Mike Catanzara is there now, you know, and he's working very hard to just solarize city facilities, you know, with the funds that he has. It's always difficult, you know, to get to the private sector, but just as we were able to provide some incentives for rainwater harvesting to the low income, I'm not sure where the funding source would come to be able to provide that same sort of model for solar. You know, we'd have to figure out a funding stream.
Irene, you're thinking, let's see if Kevin would, Kevin, you campaigned quite a bit. I wonder if you came across this question.
Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
got you.
Good. Yeah, I'm also monitoring the city council meeting because as a newbie, I have to kind of figure out what they're doing so I can act like them when that happens. But I can break away. It's been an interesting public hearing on a new development at 6th Street and Campbell, neighbors for and against. Yeah, I'm sure there's at least a dozen ways the city can promote solar and be a huge buyer of solar. I mean, the city is a big enterprise with a lot of buildings. We need to electrify all of our energy processes, and we need to buy renewable energy. Whether that's through TEP or from some other place will be a question for the future. Maybe we can force TEP to switch faster to renewable sources. I'm speaking to the choir. In fact, in Zoom, you kind of look like a choir. Please don't start singing. That's not an invitation. But we need to get off fossil fuels damn quick, right? We should have done it 20 years ago. If we were smarter, we would have. So everything. We have land, we have capital, we have funding sources. We can partner with people. We can provide incentives. So yeah, of course, I'm probably a little naive, and certainly I'm new, but those of you who know me know that I will accept this challenge with a lot of enthusiasm, and we'll look to some of you for strong support. Thanks for the opportunity to rant.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much, and for that encouragement. Now, Robert pointed out low-income homeowners need access to low-interest loans if they're going to install photovoltaic panels. So he suggests if people just take what they're spending for utilities now and use to pay off the loan, their costs will be lower monthly. So that means that I'm inferring from that perhaps some city agency could become a kind of holder for such funds for loans. At the beginning of a thought makes me think of something they did in the Housing Authority. I'm not sure if that's still happening, but we were able to help people who were getting public assistance to get off public assistance, even while they were on the housing program. And the way it was done was if they signed up and they were involved in certain goal-setting practices and attending certain programs, that if their income increased, their rent would not increase. Usually if your income increases and you're on housing support, your rent also goes up. But in this case, their rent would stay the same, and the money that they would have spent actually goes into an escrow account. And so by the time, after 3, 4, 5 years, they've got this $25,000 escrow account, some of them even more. And then we had people graduating from there who were able to buy a house in Marin County. So that kind of creative thinking would be really great to see. But that's enough for me. A question from Danielle and then from Trace. Danielle, I'm guessing, Danielle, I'm going to read Danielle's question unless she interrupts, because I know she's got connectivity issues. From living in other areas of the US or from knowing about what other municipalities are doing, what have you seen done environmentally in those other places that you wish we would do here in Tucson or Pima County?
Well, no one's answering, so I'll jump in because I've been reading tons of city plans. It's been really a great time. I recommend if you're bored reading other city plans. Thrilling. And something really cool that LA is doing right now that I bring up a lot is a huge investment in green infrastructure. You can look up and watch some of their old webinars, but millions of dollars. And what's impressive there, as I mentioned before, is a lot of that money is going to staff. So full-time positions in tree care, tree management, but also water, daylighting rivers, and really kind of learning from our mistakes of the past where we didn't take advantage of our natural, systems around us to actually help support our environmental quality in our cities. And so I've been watching what they're doing in trying to tell the story here in Tucson that LA is, doing this massive investment because they've learned from their mistakes, right? Can we learn from their mistakes before we even make some of them here and try to do some proactive action, right? And they're putting out lots of models for other cities to follow. They're putting out best practices right now that I'm trying to kind of take and replicate here as far as standards and best practices in relation to trees and urban forestry, but lots of other areas of green infrastructure as well. And so green infrastructure is really on the up across the whole country, but also, of course, across the world. And so cities are just trying out tons of cool new things, and we're able to learn from those and kind of see what works where and what we might be able to implement here. So I'm really looking towards kind of the next cool big thing in green infrastructure and being able to bring that here.
Thank you. I hope that, Danielle, if that doesn't quite get to what you were going for, please re-ask or ask in a different way. Did anybody want to ramify? Go ahead, Natalie.
I can speak to kind of the transportation side of things. I think that we have a long way to go to get into the 21st century as it relates to transportation. And there are some places in Europe, and I believe it was Houston of all places, that have adopted kind of smart transportation systems where all the different methods that one could get around, whether it be bus or scooter or bike or mass transit, walking, are kind of consolidated into a system that could be used with a smartphone to help people get around utilizing all of those different modes. And so I think that we've been kind of stuck, at least from the data we collect, in a spot where, we've got a certain percentage, a small percentage of people who bike to commute, and it's like 85% of people get in a car by themselves and drive to work. And so until we do something different to make it easier for people to utilize the other forms of transportation that we have, then I really don't think we're going to make a whole lot of progress, because we've already seen that we aren't doing that. So I think we need to really think creatively, and again, really kind of what Nicole was saying, a lot of these things have, solutions have been found. We don't have to recreate the wheel. It's just a matter of seeing what works in other places and kind of modeling it and copying it and spending a little time researching what works and what doesn't work and learning from other people's mistakes and then implementing what does work. Not every city is going to be mirror image of some city that it works, but if a system like that can work in Houston, I think that we can make it work here in Tucson. So that's what I would like to see happen at the county level.
Great. So just in case anyone else wants to add, that would be Irene or Samantha. No required. We got some questions in line. Okay. So if you would like, by the way, I'm not sure if you can copy the chat box, those of you who are not hosts, which is most of us. If you can copy the chat box, there's just a wealth of links and ideas and questions in there. And I would really recommend, or if you'd like, I'm going to volunteer Trace. I don't think he'd mind if you gave him your email in the chat, that he or I could send to you all these ideas, because it's just great stuff in here. Okay, so we're looking at, Stephen had a question. I've got to go back to find that question. Or Stephen, you want to just speak it out? You might say it faster than I could find it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, and it also echoes, I think, Trace's question earlier. The 1 million trees all need to be watered and taken care of. Would it require all of the rainwater saved off of buildings and run off the streets to service those 1 million trees, or do we have enough rainwater to actually service them without pumping up a lot more groundwater or CAP?
So, and Irene might even have better answers to this, because we've been having conversations about water and trees nonstop since I came on board. It's a a ongoing conversation point. And honestly, I think something that it's going to look different as we start doing this, right? So the answer I give you now might be different than the answer I give you in several months. So just keep that in mind. You know, we're all learning as we're doing this, and there's a lot of, you know, for lack of a better phrase, low-hanging fruit that we haven't taken advantage of citywide. You mentioned capturing rainwater. We just need to be doing a lot more of that, right? Passive rainwater harvesting needs to be standard for any new landscape installation. And what I've been saying, which is very basic, is just every tree gets a basin. So that's kind of our starting point, right? At least every tree should be capturing the water that is falling immediately around it. And so that's kind of the bare minimum that we're operating here with. But Tucson Water now has the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Fund program. Blue Baldwin is building up her team to strategically use the funds that they are raising to install green infrastructure all around the city, and we're working very closely to make sure that all of those that, you know, what we're doing is in lockstep, that all of those installations both have maximized trees, and then my end that we're installing BI with every tree, so that coordination is there. The other kind of, I guess, messaging step back I'm trying to take is trying really hard to avoid a dichotomy between water and trees. You know, to me, that is not necessarily the water dichotomy. That's not the conversation I'm trying to always have, right? We have a lot of other drought, water use issues, and landscape are very complicated, but we have a lot of other areas where water conservation makes sense. And for me, our urban forest is actually not one of them, right? Our urban forest provides us a huge number of benefits that vastly outstrip the cost of water and, you know, really bring maximum value. So a healthy ecosystem, a healthy urban forest system will pay back dividends every time. And so when I talk about water conservation and landscape, you know, that's thinking about what are our best landscape practices in general. Whenever we're doing, just as an example, whenever we're doing park projects recently, we talk about turf pullback, right? So there are a lot of conversations we can have about best water management practices in landscape. I try to avoid, whenever I can, drawing a dichotomy between trees and water use. And I think we've learned some lessons with this. Again, I hate to go to LA, but I just happened to watch a webinar this morning with them. And they learned over the past couple of years, they were also very hit with drought. And so they put in water use restrictions, right? And a lot of people stopped watering their trees. Street trees were taken off irrigation. And the city is really paying for that now, right? And with massive die-off of trees. Growing new trees takes a heck of a lot more water than just maintaining the trees we have, right? So their new slogan is both save water and save trees. They're tacking that onto the end there to try to avoid people shutting off their water to trees during times of drought. So I would encourage all of you to go out and start having conversations about water conservation more broadly, but trying to avoid that kind of either it's water or trees, right?
Thank you, Nicole. And what city was that made that error?
Oh, well, all of us have, all across the Southwest, we have all made this mistake. I was just on a webinar this morning with LA, and I think their website is savewater.org, I think. And now if you go on there, it's Save Water and Save Trees. They put both on there. So we are learning from that mistake as we all speak.
Thank you. We've got 8 minutes left, and there's a question from our Zoom leaders, and then one from Natalie.
We actually had 2 questions, so Paula will go first.
Okay, so my question to Nicole is if you could talk a bit about the extent to which you talked a lot about new trees, but to what extent does your job include maintenance of already existing trees? And as part of maintenance, not just of existing trees, but also the new ones, is anything being done to train the maintenance people so that we don't get some of the strange prunings that we've seen doing terrible things to trees?
Yes, that's been pretty much my entire job for the past year. You know, maybe you picture me out in the field every day, you know, in like a really nice pair of planting pants, and I'm out planting trees every day. That's not what I've been doing for the past year. So what the last year has been is me learning from folks like Irene and really connecting to all our departments to kind of figure out what is our path forward, right? So we know we're going to move forward with trees as assets. That's kind of our new city box, and that we're going to treat trees as investments from when they're planted to when they are mature and providing us all of those great benefits. And so that's going to take actually quite a bit of work citywide, right? We haven't treated trees as individual assets that we actually manage and we report work against, and we budget for, right? Realistically budget for. And that's going to take training staff and also an investment in our staff, right? Getting them the training, elevating what we consider to be, you know, an entry-level job or something that we don't pay that much for, but actually bringing that work up and getting people to a different pay class, right? So thinking about job training. So that's all going to take quite a bit of effort, and that's kind of why I mentioned, you know, keep an eye on the budget, right? Because we're going to need support for this this moving forward. So yes, just to quickly answer your question, yes, we're looking at a pretty comprehensive citywide training program that, you know, will take some time to implement, but that was one of the first things we got going here.
And existing trees,
Oh yeah, your other question. Yes, so my title is Urban Forestry Program Manager, so I'm looking holistically, you know, outside of newly planted trees, but all of our trees, and that's kind of why I pushed to the watering note, right? Watering our old established trees is one of the most important things we can do during drought. They tend to be the most susceptible to drought damage, and they're also providing us the largest number of benefits, right? Because they're our oldest and biggest trees. So it's a comprehensive effort. I could just talk your ear off for the next hour about all the things we're working on right now, but I'll just have to ask you to trust me that we're kind of tackling a holistic urban forestry approach.
Great.
And my question is, actually, Stephen sort of asked my question, but a couple thoughts on where do you put 1 million trees? Because without using groundwater to do it. And there actually is only one answer, and that's next to roofs or next to or in streets, because that's the only water harvesting surfaces that really provide a lot of water. And the in the street part is actually the greatest opportunity we have, because if you do it correctly, then you have the opportunity of not only dealing with the urban heat island, you can also take the first key step to dealing with our transportation problem. Because if you can make neighborhoods shaded and safe and interesting, then you have the maximum chance of getting people to walk or bike to someplace nearby. So it's actually critical. But the magnitude of the problem is really daunting, because if you're going to put 500,000 trees in the streets, it's going to take 150,000 traffic calming devices to do it. And there's a whole lot of opportunity there to make our neighborhoods into fantastic places, but it's going to be a different city. So
well, let's give him a chance to answer now, Nicole. I wonder if we want to give Irene a chance to respond. And you don't have to, you can toss it back to her.
I guess I missed that question that was initially asked because I was responding to Stephen's question, which I'm typing right now. So I'm just going to address that, Stephen. I'm going to say quantity-wise, the city probably has more than enough water from capturing rainfall because we have so much impervious surface. So right now, what we're doing at Tucson Water is assessing the commercial rainwater harvesting ordinance to see its compliance. Well, we know that it's been non-compliant. You know, it's the same problem that we have all over the city. They don't know how to use their irrigation. They're not using their controllers in the right way. And so they're using more potable water than they actually need. But the other thing that we're looking at is Pima County last year, maybe it was 3 years ago, adopted their detention guidelines, in which those guidelines, the first ½ inch of rainfall has to be captured and retained on site. So those are for commercial developments. So I'm looking at to see that first ½ inch, is it more or less than what's needed for those plants? And what I'm finding right now is every time they capture that ½ inch rainfall, it's going to be more than they need to water or be sufficient for their water budget for those plant needs. So I would say that we don't have to capture all of it, but even if we just captured 85% or even 50% of the rainwater that's falling on our roofs and our pavements, we're going to be in pretty good shape for our plants. So that's what I was typing in there.
Thank you, Irene. That's very encouraging. And I think Aunt Audrey would agree with you even more emphatically. If there's more rain falling than we can use for the trees. But Nicole, would you like to ramify, or is that a good cover?
I think Trace answered his own question. I'll just also mention that 80% of our available land is private, right? So I look toward the partners, especially Trees for Tucson. We're talking about neighborhood plantings, right? We need to get trees in people's yards so that we're actually reaping the most benefits from them. My one cautionary tale on transportation that I'm learning very quickly is that we ask a heck of a lot from our transit corridors. So they're where we move through. We move all of our utilities through there. We frequently look to landscape there. We ask a lot of those transit corridors, and so we lose a lot of trees there as well. So I think it's going to be a careful balance of land that is going to both allow the tree to grow, right? So right tree, right place, and then also where is actual available land and where are people actually, right? So our public spaces, our roads, and then also looking to private land homeowners.
Natalie's got a question, and I'd like to insert a fill in the blanks from Kevin Dahl. Tucson has 284,181 voters. If each voter planted 4 trees, fill in the blank. Thank you, Kevin.
I didn't have a question. I had more of a follow-up to this conversation about trees. And I would like to invite everybody, when they think about or they get concerned about the water that might be needed for these trees, even if it is well water, to have a look at where a large majority of our water goes currently, and that's to agriculture. And so if we can really look at how much water is being used for agriculture in Pima County or Arizona collectively, and maybe shed some light on that through our elected officials, that we don't think that our water should be going to grow hay that is then that's then sent off to Saudi Arabia so they don't have to use the water they don't have. Those are bigger issues that I think that we could be addressing to really prioritize our virgin water for things like trees and not be so concerned about the water.
Thank you. Keeping the larger perspective here. Richard.
Hello. On the question of maintaining trees, I want to thank the city for recently creating several places around the city where people could take all the monsoon weeds and tree trimmings and things for the city to pick up, because in our neighborhood we've got a lot of public spaces, 2 washes, a walkway, several medians, and it's really helpful to have these places where we can put these without having to take these things all the way to the landfills. And if they can be used for mulch by the city rather than be put into the landfills, that would be great. So I'm wondering if the city could consider keeping these places open longer, where people can take the weeds and tree trimmings and stuff too.
So looking at a more creative and durable form of capturing what you call green waste, essentially, yard waste, even if it's from the public properties. So Kevin Green's not here tonight, unfortunately. He's in communication with the city about their zero waste roadmap. So he'd be a good one to talk to about that. Anyone on our panel would like to respond?
Just keep an eye on the Los Reales Sustainability Campus, formerly the Los Reales Landfill. That's going to be a hub citywide for compost, for mulch, for our future tree nursery, for education centers, for recycling and reuse. So that's going to just, that investment in that space is going to be huge, I think, for the city. So keep an eye on that and let folks know, you know, what features you would like to see there. Divert, that's just a primary spot where all of our landscapers go to dump green waste as well. So that was also one of the first things I had a meeting with Carlos, the head of environmental and general services, about that, about just step one, diverting all of that out of the landfill, right? We can make use of it, whether it's feeding elephants or mulching. So there are good uses for that citywide, absolutely.
All right. Well, I remember standing in a doctor's office waiting to see the doctor, and there was a poster on the wall with all these aphorisms, and one of them that stuck in my mind was, that guest is most welcome who knows when to leave. And the corollary of that is that host is most welcome who knows when to end. So we don't want to overstay our welcome this evening with you, although it would be fun to talk another hour. I'd like to formally thank Samantha Neville, the District 5 aide, chief facilitator for the county strategic plan, the county District 5 strategic plan, and Nicole Gillet, who's been spending the last year just getting to know the city and the trees and the people who, all the departments, all the people who are putting their hands on trees one way or another, and keeping us mindful of the importance of getting out there. And Natalie, for your love of clean air and alternative transportation, and keeping us mindful of that major mega threat, climate change. And Irene, for your focus on urban heat island, raising awareness and getting actions to cool the urban heat island. You've been a great support in so many ways to so many people. And that was a beautiful story, by the way, taking those vets outside for a little while each day, the gift of kindness. So let's all remember to give a gift of kindness to someone, especially someone who may not be our favorite person for whatever reason. If we can shed the same light of friendliness, sympathetic joy, and compassion with everyone, that's the kind of community that we will call sustainable. And that's really what Samantha was saying. That solution is best that is our solution made together.